Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Good Cop 2.0, the podcast. I finally figured out the name after 2 days of doing this. In the studio with me, which we have like this really cool, they took out the bed and it's like a bigger bedroom, like studio space here where we're recording. And I guess we can tell people now that we're at the Royal Hotel here in Geneva. In with me is Chris Snowdon, who is head of Lifestyle Economics, Institute of Economic Affairs. First of all, I've never heard of someone who is a lifestyle economist.
No, you wouldn't. We made it up, really.
Did you really?
I'm the first one.
In the world?
And also the world leader. I'm the first and the best lifestyle economist.
How does one become a lifestyle economist?
Well, you got to preferably be an economist and definitely be interested in people's lifestyles and lifestyle regulation. Lifestyle regulation is not something I made up, by the way. It's a fairly well-worn term at the EU level, at least. They're pretty upfront about what this is about. You know, it's about regulating what people do. It's not really about health.
And how do people not go up in arms? Like, how do we just sit passively? And I think about stuff and I'm like, oh, that doesn't really affect me.
I guess there's an element of the boiling frog about it. This stuff is very incremental. Salami slicing, each thing seems a bit too small to bother complaining about. But also, to give a more sort of economist answer, there's a whole school of economics called public choice, which looks at political activity through the lens of normal economic incentives. So we look at why various actors in politics, including the electorate, act as they do. And basically they do it through their own self-interest. And so people may well be annoyed at these little regulations. Some people may even see that in the long term, these little regulations are going to build up and have built up in the case of smoking to be really very large infringements on liberty. But they don't have enough incentive to do anything about it because they're busy people. They've got their own things to do, their families to raise, their jobs to do. So for most people, insofar as they are annoyed by the nanny state, they can't express it very greatly. They can maybe at the most write a letter to the local paper, maybe sign a petition if someone like you put someone under their nose. Possibly at a push respond to a public consultation, but the vast number of people would never even know about public consultations, let alone respond to them. And so the effect is you have these very highly motivated state-funded or Bloomberg-funded pressure groups who fill their day thinking of ways to persecute various people that they don't like and lobby the government and get stories in the media. Whereas your normal average punter just simply doesn't have a big enough incentive to do anything about it.
Exactly. The first time when you're talking about this, the first idea that came to my head is when you're allowed, what time you have to stop drinking. Yes. Now, this is very common in Canada. I grew up in Canada.
And England too, yeah.
Yeah. Bars close at 2 a.m. You cannot serve your last drink. Like I got my liquor serving thing because they made us do that halfway through in 1997 or something. They came out and said, well, you need to learn how to serve liquor. So there's certain things like I'm not allowed to serve someone more than 2 drinks at a time. Like there's all these how you can drink laws.
People can't buy a round in Canada?
You can buy a round, but you have to make sure the waitress needs to know that all those people are in the round. Are there. You can't buy more than 2 drinks at a time for yourself. So there's liquor laws around this. And a couple of years ago in Greece, there was an uproar because they wanted to stop drinking at 5 a.m.
Right.
And the country was in an uproar. Like everybody freaked out. Like, what are you telling me? I can't serve alcohol after a certain time. No. And at that time, I didn't think much of it because I was like, oh, get over yourself. So who needs to drink after 2:00 in the morning?
Well,
yeah. But now when I'm thinking back to it and we're trying to compare all this stuff, that's something that was trying to impose on an entire nation, a lifestyle that, there were no rules or regulations around drinking.
It's interesting, like what rules some cultures will just find absolutely preposterous and outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
And it does come down to your history and what you're used to. But thinking logically about it, why does any country have a national closing time for bars and restaurants? Why can't it simply be that once the bar owner has decided he wants to shut up, or once the customers have left, that's when you close, that's when you stop serving? George Orwell wrote about this in the 1940s. Britain had tighter licensing laws than it does now, but still, like in Britain, 11 o'clock is really the average time. It's gone on a bit now. You get a few more pubs will open until 12 and maybe 1 at the weekend, but generally speaking, 11 p.m. is like drinking up time in Britain. And in Orwell's day, it was 10:30, and he just said, we are missing out on so much tourism from Europeans. You know, you go to Europe and bar owners just close when they want to close. And why should it be any other way? But in the Anglosphere, we're kind of used to the government bossing us around when it comes to alcohol, whereas in Greece and Spain, they're just not. And so the very idea of licensing being a national, or licensing laws, licensing hours being something for the national government, this strikes people as preposterous. I would like more and more people to see nanny state regulation in general as being preposterous. By the way, Greece tried about 10 years ago, when they were trying to balance the books, they tried to introduce a tax on wine for the first time in their entire history, and they have a very distinguished history in Greece. And this was overturned by the High Court as being unconstitutional.
I love that. I love it. I love my people, my roots. But then you take this whole nanny state, and is there a word that's more nanny than nanny state when it comes to vaping? Like, I think nanny state,
it's too soft.
It is too soft of a word.
Coercive paternalism is a phrase I like to use. It's a bit of a mouthful. The bully state is something that people are trying to get into circulation.
Bully
I
state
actually am
sounds
quite
good.
happy with nanny state, purely because the people we're talking about, the nannies, they really hate it. I agree with you. I think it's too soft a term. But it's amazing how much people in so-called public health really object to being called nanny status for some reason. People in general don't like to admit that they are paternalistic and illiberal, and they will use all sorts of arguments to try and pretend that they're not, often involving the children and things like that.
But that's like the whole point, is that just own up. Own up to thinking you know best, because then we can start having a conversation. Maybe they don't want to have that conversation. I mean, some of our regulations in Canada around vaping that people are like, I mean, obviously the FCTC does not think they're good enough because we've never won Orchid Award. But we've also haven't gotten Ashtray either. Makes no sense. So if you were to tell someone, like, they've controlled us over what a vape shop owner can say and cannot say with prison time. So again, this is all to save the children. Just so you know, federally, your fine is, you can't get fined more than $50,000 no matter how many times you sell to a kid. $50,000, 0 prison time. Right. If a grown-ass adult showed up in your shop and you said to them, well, Public Health England or Health Canada says this is much safer than smoking, and you don't hand in all the documentation, if you don't hand over that, and that ends up causing a sale, that is $500,000 fine plus 18 months in a federal prison.
Yeah, it seems disproportionate, doesn't it?
It does. And it seems a little crazy. Like, hello, not only are we going to tell you what to say, but heaven forbid you say this, we're putting you in prison.
Citing your own government's, literature and estimates.
Yeah. It still will put you in prison.
Yeah. Well, you can get 5 years in prison for possessing a nicotine pouch now in France. So the world doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
The world doesn't make, now we gave the power. We give more and more power to government officials that know nothing of what they're doing in order to shut up the nanny state. And that's what I'm feeling that's happening. This is why, because they're louder. They're bigger bullies than we could ever be.
I've written a lot about this going back years, what I call the sock puppets. And I've written a lengthy kind of academic article called Bootlegging Baptists, which for the next few weeks is not behind a paywall if people want want to check it out.
Okay.
It's a very important part of the picture, because why, if you believe in people acting in their rational self-interest, as economists do, why would you set up a nanny state group? Why would you dedicate your life to stopping other people doing something that doesn't really affect you? This, in a way, has been the question I've been trying to answer for nearly 20 years. I think I've pretty much nailed the answer now. And it just comes down to these people who managed to secure money from elite sources, whether it's a state or the likes of Mike Bloomberg. You know, lots of people have strong feelings about these issues. You can tell that if you look at opinion polls, things like online gambling and smoking and even vaping are quite unpopular with people, and measures to combat them are fairly popular a lot of the time. I would argue people are not really thinking about second-order consequences and economic effects and all that kind of stuff. But nevertheless, people have views about these things. The question is how, or what does it take for people to take these fairly shallow opinions and turn them into political action? And the answer, quite simply, is resources. You need resources. People have got opinions about a million and one things. They're not going to actually do anything about them because they're busy living their own lives. But if you suddenly open up a whole bank of money and say, we are now recruiting people to go around lobbying for sugar taxes and against, or for e-cig flavor bans, anything really. I mean, people will take a job to advocate for anything. I'm not saying these people are insincere, by the way. The point is they don't need to be sincere. They don't know how to believe it at all. They can just see it as a career and then move on to something else in 5 years' time. The critical thing is that there are resources available. And there are resources available from the state and from a handful of slightly eccentric warped billionaires for coercive paternalism. And there is basically no money for people on the other side of the argument, apart from a bit from industry. But as soon as you take money from industry, you're immediately tainted in the eyes of the media, public health, and the government. So that's not really a fair fight. I think this is the crucial thing that needs to be understood, is that without these resources, these groups wouldn't exist, really. Might be the odd half-mad person shouting in the street about them, but they wouldn't exist. And society would be a lot better for it. And I don't think, actually, society would really miss them, because I think, as I say, these opinions are held on a fairly shallow level. The issues themselves are not particularly salient to politicians. They don't go into office saying, I'm going to introduce plain packaging for tobacco, or flavor bans for e-cigarettes. They don't really care. They've quite rightly got much bigger fish to fry. But when they fail to fry their bigger fish, and they find that the business of government is more tricky than they first thought, capitulating to single issue pressure groups seems to be quite tempting to them. But that's just because, apart from the fact that these groups are being given money to apply that pressure, and politicians obviously will respond to pressure, we just seem to live now in a climate of illiberalism where it's not considered ludicrous for governments to be getting involved in these things, in the same way that the Greeks think it's ludicrous for the government to be getting involved in what time people can order an ouzo.
Yeah, no. And when I think about it, and we were talking about it during our panel, which I'll get the link put up in our description of this episode, is Mike Bloomberg. How much privilege and confidence and does he have to I'm going to take $1.4 billion of my own money so the world can be the way I want it to be? I'm just thinking about the ego. And Mike Bloomberg, if your people are listening, because I'm convinced people listen for him, because I don't even think he listens himself unless he wants to. I get it. You have money, but who do you think you are to be able to say, these are the values that I want in this world, so I'm going to spend the money to make it happen? It's disgusting.
It's not an attitude that I appreciate, clearly, but if you look again at opinion polls, pretty consistently for the last 50, 60 years, between a quarter and a third of people have been quite happy to have the total prohibition of tobacco. And we just have to accept that there is always a significant minority of people who hold very illiberal views, think they know best, think that other people should do things for their own good, and are quite happy to achieve that end by using the power of the state. And it just so happens that one of the richest men in the world falls into that camp. And that's very unfortunate. But he has said himself on TV that his so-called philanthropy is his way to get through the pearly gates in double quick time. I mean, he's gone on TV saying this. He goes, there will not be any debate when I'm talking to St. Peter at the pearly gates. I'm going straight through because I've given all this money to these good causes. He thinks he's saving millions of lives a year.
Oh, well, you know what? That's your conversation with him and Peter. That's his conversation with Peter.
I think he's going in the opposite direction when he gets to there myself. But
absolutely. I think he's just pissed he never got the presidential bid. So
yeah, he didn't do too well, though, did he?
No, he didn't. Well, there is so much more we can talk to, but I have been limited in my time here. So, Chris, I want to say thank you very much for coming on this podcast. Thanks for participating in Good Cop 2.0. I think just leave us with one thing. What should people who use safer nicotine products and want them, one thing that they should do to go out there and have their voice heard?
Is there one single thing?
Or
whatever means of communication you're best at, use that, I guess I would say.
Okay.
For a lot of people, that would just be talking to their friends or going on social media, and that's good. If you can write letters to your MPs, they actually have more impact than a lot of people think. But yeah, just posting, disagreeing, community noting, WHO misinformation, it all helps, and I'm not, like I said to start with, I'm not expecting a grassroots movement of people who are going to just basically put their entire lives on hold to go campaigning against the latest nanny state policy, because even if they win, there'll be another nanny state policy around 5 minutes later. And we just get exhausted in this war of attrition from people who've got literally hundreds of millions of dollars against ordinary consumers who haven't really got anything. It's not a fair fight. The very least we could do to kind of level the playing field would be for taxpayers' money to not be used anymore funding lobby groups. I think that is quite straightforwardly unethical. I don't care what the cause is. Pay for your own moral crusades.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Okay. Thanks for listening to Good Cop 2.0 and hope everyone has a great day.